Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of our podcast. I'm here in this studio with my dad on another beautiful Saturday morning, and I did not choose today's topic, but I was highly interested when Warfield offered it up as today's topic. So I'm going to let him explain first why he chose it. So tell us what prompted today's topic, and tell us what the topic is as well.
The topic is jobs in North Texas or employment in North Texas, and that's a little broad, but we're going to kind of play with it a little bit and kind of give an idea where the economy stands because you hear a lot about it, how job growth. We may touch on how it affects inflation, but talk about it in general in North Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area. And the reason I started thinking about this earlier in this week, we were driving around, and within like 5 minutes, I saw an upteen amount of signs that said, now hiring, $15 an hour for night shift. They were on, literally, I was at a stoplight right next to me in a truck, had the name of the company, and right under it had a big old sign that says, now hiring. It's just phenomenal that the amount of signs I'm seeing. I mean, you just get out anywhere in this area.
And wait, I want to stop you. So this now hiring issue has been an issue for like over a year.
I know, but I mean,
okay,
it's just going on and on and on.
Oh, okay, so what prompted the topic was the fact that it's been probably a year or two since we've had like low, or since people have been quitting their job. There's been that whole Great Resignation and all that stuff. So what prompted this topic for you was the fact that it's still going on?
Yeah, I mean, I've known that. I work for a large organization. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'm going to work for a large organization, and we have had jobs posted for a year. So it's not just the fact all these signs are out there, is why is it so hard for these people to fill their jobs?
I can tell you why.
Why?
Because there's not enough benefits. The income isn't that great for the Dallas area. There's a lack of motivation to pursue a job when a lot of people's livelihoods can just get turned upside down by being fired. There's debt, there's loans, there's political upheaval.
Those are pretty broad reasons, but getting back to that, no, more specifically to jobs, income or your wage and your benefits, I think would be the most significant or direct impact on choosing a job. And I'll get to that point because, like I said, one of the signs was $15 an hour for the night shift. Now, we've talked about this before. We've talked about wages before in Texas and development and things of that nature. This is the targeted, when you see all the news headlines, $15 an hour minimum wage. Why is that not attractive to people then? This is what people say we want. First of all, the night shift is never an attractive shift. No one wants to work 11 to 7 in the morning or whatever that shift might be. That's pretty rough. So usually those shifts do receive a higher wage level than your daytime shifts. But to see the amount of employment needs out there, and where are they? I mean, this was across a broad spectrum of employers. Like I said, I work for a large organization, and we are struggling to hire people, and it's an 8-to-5 job. It has good benefits. Now, we are not the highest paying organization, but we're not also, a corporation trying to increase profits every 2 days, where you're held to a standard where you're always got to be finding new ways to be more efficient in management, finding ways to motivate your employees. No, if you come in there and do a good job where I work and work hard, it's not a great job for a lot of people. Now, there are some more managerial type and director type and higher level and higher income jobs in our organization. But, for someone who just wants a good job with good benefits, why are we struggling?
I think you can answer that question a little bit, or at least you have some idea of why you're struggling, because there's been conversations about whether or not it's a good place to work.
Well, it is in general. I mean, I have issues with certain people in the organization. That's, like I said, we're not going to talk about where I work. But I've talked to people. I talked to a lot of people, and we, where I work, we interact with a large amount of people across the diverse, employment, and everybody's struggling. And there was also some recent articles about something called quiet quitting, which
Yeah.
I think that has some play, but I don't think it has some play in how much people are not working or not looking for jobs. And I looked at it. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, there's all these signs out there, but unemployment's under 4%, 4% or lower, which means we're close to full employment by most economist standards. So that's one reason. I mean, up front, we got to be, we got to mention that most people are working already. So in some ways, the only way to get people to, for you to hire is to get people to quit a job and come to yours. So what are they offering to make their opportunities more beneficial to someone than somebody's current job?
So I do want to. There's a report by Dallas Innovates or Dallas Innovates. I'm not exactly sure. It's just basically a business article or a business publication here in the Dallas area, and so they did a story on an actual report. Now it says that with the Great Resignation, a lot of people quit their jobs, and so one of the reasons why we're seeing all these jobs left open in Dallas is because people in Dallas have the job seekers have higher, not marketability, but power in finding a job that suits their needs. And so that's specifically for the Dallas area, which is why a lot of people can be more flexible with waiting on a better job offer because they have, number one, the demand is there, and number two, because they have more marketability with their background, with their experience, and with their confidence in what they can do, and also their training and the skill set. So basically this report is saying that like the Dallas area has a good job market candidate pool because those candidates are strong candidates within their skill set. And because they're strong candidates within their skill set, they can demand a job that is more favorable to what they want than what the employer wants. Now, this is according to the Robert Half report, and this was in July of 2022. And so I'm just going to read some of the numbers, and then Dad, I heard you want to say a point. You're jumping off your seat. You're so excited. You want to say a point. So it says, according to the June survey of more than 2,400 workers nationwide, so it's a small survey, 41% of respondents said they are currently looking or plan to look for a new role in the second half of 2022. The numbers were even higher in Dallas, where 48% of workers plan to seek a new job during the rest of 2022. Dallas workers are very confident, and they want more money. A resounding 93% of Dallas workers feel confident about their skill set and marketability. That's fueling nearly half of them to seek more money than where they're getting from their current jobs. And then I'm just going to list the 3 motivating factors that are fueling Dallas workers to look elsewhere. Number 1, more pay. Number 2, greater opportunities for advancement. And number 3, feeling burnout with current role.
But if you go back and look at historic trends, those 3 things have always been there. I mean, we always want more pay. We always want more benefits. We always want something that makes us feel, and you didn't mention this, but I've seen this, more fulfilled in our job. And you've been in the same job for 3+ years, there's always going to be a feeling of burnout. Even if you like the job, there's going to be days when you don't feel like going to work. You're just tired of whatever the same old part of your job is. And even if you like it, I mean, it happens. It's human nature. But counterintuitively, what I said up front, this is from the Dallas Morning News, and it's an article. Let me go back to the top of it. It says, still booming, how Texas keeps attracting more workers and creating more jobs. And that's, I knew this was out there, and yet when you see all these signs, who are we looking for? You talked about there's a lot of good people with good marketable skills. Okay, that's good. But if we're attracting more companies, we're attracting more jobs. Are we bringing in the labor force to fill those jobs? But real quick, from the article, higher interest rates are slowing the real estate business, but the job market has proven to be more resilient, especially in Texas. The state added nearly 73,000 workers in July. That's the state. The second biggest monthly gain of the year. Through the first 7 months of 22, Texas grew jobs at an annualized rate of 6.1%, and the U.S. average is 3.8%. And in Dallas, we're at an annualized rate of 8.4% job growth. We're creating jobs much faster than we can fill them. Because even if we start recruiting outside of North Texas, outside of Dallas, outside of North Texas, we're still going to have this huge gap in this job growth and filling it. And so, all to Victoria's points, is it just wages? Is it just, the benefits? Is it just burnout in a previous job? What do we do to fill these jobs as they develop? And I think, this is something that an upteen amount of, just thousands of businesses are stressing about. Because like I said, I work with large organizations, and we are holding jobs. I mean, we have jobs that are open for a while, postings that are open for a while. And this is not uncommon. And it's a little bit, yet, I say this, and yet everybody's feeling it. Like I talk to other people in other businesses, industries. They're having a hard time hiring people, having a hard time. And I don't want to say keeping it. I don't see this, the Great Resignation happened, but it didn't happen in Dallas, Texas. I went back and looked. April of 2020, we all know where we were in April of 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. The unemployment rate soared to over 12%. It's under 4%. So even with this infamous Great Resignation, people are still coming back to work and people are still keeping their jobs. So what do employers need to do? What do organizations need to do to find people to work for them? What are the real keys right now? Excuse me.
Well, I want to offer that the traditional job outcome, or the traditional job day-to-day job, that's changed, mostly in part because of technology, spurred on by the fact that the pandemic has made people realize that they can work on their own if they have the ability to. This is another thing, people who have the background and ability to even, because in order to have a certain type of job, like a tech job, you're going to need to have the best internet, reliable computer, a good phone, all that kind of stuff in order to maintain your work for that job. And so those jobs sometimes can fund that. They can pay for your laptop, or they'll pay for whatever, or you just make enough money to do all that stuff. I have a lot of friends. I went to go visit some friends in Chicago, and I was shocked. I have 3 friends that live in Chicago. All of them have remote work from home jobs that seem fake. They seem like a scam. And they're not. I mean, they're tech startup jobs. And I'm like, you show up to your online meeting, you get your assignment for the day, they make good money, and they don't work nearly half as hard as I do, as someone who works in a studio and interacts with a lot of people. I'm not saying that to complain, because I really like my job, and I can't be at a job where I don't do anything because I feel like I'm wasting my life. But it's like those tech startup jobs is also what's fueling a lot of these jobs that are coming in right now. But those jobs can get cut just as quick as they start popping up. And I'm actually seeing that on LinkedIn, where TikTok and all these other startups that I have no idea who they are, where they came from, but people my age or people who, not my age, I would say millennials, are starting to get laid off. And they've been at this job for 2 years, and they're things like content manager. And I'm just kind of I am hesitant to be optimistic about a job market where all these job markets are, and I'm kind of going on a rant, where all these job openings are here, but I'm kind of at some point, these jobs that are popping up are going to start are going to start disappearing. And I'm already seeing that with a lot of people in my LinkedIn, where they're starting to get laid off. Like, there's mass resignations at places like TikTok and all these other places. So I just think that's an interesting point, that although I'm sure not all of the jobs here in Dallas are specifically like tech startup jobs, the ones in Austin are. The ones in Houston, most of them are tech startup jobs. So it's kind of like, I want to be hesitant about like seeing all these jobs and attracting talent when there's a point to be made that they're probably not sustainable jobs.
And that goes back to the economy. Are we going to go into a recession? Are we in a recession?
Oh, I think we're in a recession. I think if we're not in a recession, we're going into one.
We're in a unique situation.
Yeah, that's true.
And again, sometimes recessions can be only in certain geographical areas. Mm-hmm. Like if something like, what happened a long time ago, which eventually caused what we call the Rust Belt, where certain jobs move on, they take those jobs out of that area, but other areas of the country can still be successful. So to your point, let's say there's a lot of tech startups that are struggling. Areas of the country that don't rely or haven't relied on those businesses may not be as affected by the recession as someplace where, a lot more people are being laid off. Here in North Texas, not being reliant on tech startups, for example, we may not be as hit as hard or even hit at all by a recession if one comes, versus an area where, you're describing, where if there's a lot of tech startup companies, a lot of people had jobs for a little while, 1, 2, 3 years, and then they get laid off. They don't have maybe the resources to survive a layoff, a recession, so they may have to move to new areas to find jobs. They may have to change careers. The recession that most people fear was the one in 2008, where the whole country got hit. Some areas harder than others, but the problem was so many people were scrambling. I mean, for any kind of job. I mean, right now in Dallas, you can get a service industry job. That is not a problem at all. The people who run restaurants and retail and things of that nature, they are struggling to find people. But it's not just them. Like I mentioned, it's across the large part of the economic region. But you get into an area where the recession may hit harder, then you're going to have a different kind of job conversation.
Yeah,
than we're having now.
And I was going to say, actually, so this was the point I was going to make earlier, and then I kind of went off on that rant. I think workplaces need to understand that we are in a different job environment than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah,
meaning,
you're starting to see businesses, in business magazines, those kind of articles pop up.
Yeah, meaning that it's expected for us to take our work home. As much as people want to say, oh no, like, 9 to 5 job, you don't need to take your work home. That's just not the case anymore. People are always working. And in order to sustain an environment where you're always going to be on or on call, or you're going to feel the need to work, then you also need to create flexibility during the work day, as in people can come in later or people can work from home some days. I'm not a big proponent of like working from home every day, because human people are social creatures, and you need that camaraderie, and you need that interaction really to get your job done. I could not do any of my jobs from home. Like even the report, like me writing articles, that's very difficult for me as someone who loves storytelling to do from home, because I want to see the story from the person's perspective, and the story is much richer when I can go out and actually meet that person. So for example, when I was in Chicago, I had the chance to actually interview one of my story subjects in Chicago, and the story was so much richer because she took me around Harvey, Illinois, which is south of Chicago, and told me her story. So it's stuff like that where you gain a lot of momentum and energy from being in an environment where you can interact with other people. Some humans are the anomaly, whatever. You get what I'm saying. Some humans are just shut-ins. That is a thing. and a work from home environment where they don't have to interact with many people and they can do whatever job that they can as long as they're doing it successfully and it's meaningful to them, great, and it funds their lifestyle to pay rent and to eat food and all that stuff. But I think in order to retain workers, there needs to be flexibility during the traditional workday because we're always working. Sorry,
Great point. And that's been around for a long time, since corporate America started that decades ago, where there's this expectation that if you needed to answer an email at 9 o'clock at night, you're going to answer an email at 9 o'clock at night. If you're going to respond to something, you're going to respond to it, up until when you go to bed. And being old-fashioned, being conservative, and being lazy, I've been against that. No, but seriously.
But if you were doing a job that you loved, wouldn't you be like?
And that makes a difference.
Yeah,
it makes a difference. Your passion for your work will make a difference in how much time you're going to dedicate to it. But blanket expectations are one thing, and that goes back to what I touched on for half a second earlier. Is this quiet quitting that's going on? And you've seen the articles where people are like, and if you haven't seen the articles, quiet quitting is not quitting your job; it's quitting doing the extra. To put it as simple as I can think of it, meaning you're not going to answer that email at 9 o'clock in the morning. That same email is going to be there at 8:01 a.m. when you go in, and you'll answer it then. It's kind of a psychology of, I have been over backwards for this corporation for years, and what has it gotten me? And that's kind of, and this is real interesting because over the last years, also in business publications, you're starting to see people talk about productivity on a slight decline. Is this quiet quitting attitude part of that? They haven't put all those kind of pieces together yet, but we are looking at, how much extra are people still willing to put in after all this time? Part of the Great Resignation, I think, was part of this. What am I giving to this company? What are they giving to me? Yeah, they give me a paycheck, and there's this expectation. There's been this historic expectation in this country that you should be grateful for this paycheck, that you owe much more than just you receiving a paycheck. This kind of psychology that the upper echelon expects the middle and the working class just to come in and give us your all, and then what do you give us beyond that is what people are starting to ask. Now, what level are we in regards to how this is affecting people's productivity and this quiet quitting? I think sociologists and stuff like that will have to go study that somewhere down the road because we don't know. But something's going on. I mean, if articles are popping up, if you see productivity have slight declines, then you got to start thinking something is happening, but what is it? We don't know yet. And then now, if we throw in this recession, that attitude may shift because people get a little worried about having a job and they may want to do extra things to keep it. So you get this back and forth. How much power will employees have if the recession comes into play? If the recession doesn't come into play or it's a mild recession, then you may see, back to what Victoria's talking about, people are going to want more. They're going to want some kind of response to their needs more so than they've had in the past.
And I do want to make a point that I think this quiet quitting, although there's been I saw an article on LinkedIn that said quiet quitting is fueled by Gen Z. I think quiet quitting, from my observations in looking at the job market and in talking with people and in working with a variety of generations, I think quiet quitting is mostly fueled by the millennial generation. And I'll before this podcast is over, while you're talking, I'll look to see if there's any statistics to back up that theory. But basically, the reason why I say I believe the millennial generation is the one fueling the quiet quitting is because they graduated when the 2008 recession hit. So they took jobs that they needed to get, and they couldn't pursue their dreams. They couldn't do all this stuff. My generation saw that whole situation, i.e. specifically in my family, looking at my siblings get a job that necessarily wasn't the dream job that they had thought of when they were, younger or whatever. But anyways, the point that I'm making there is that the millennials, I think, are disenchanted with this idea of corporate climbing, American dream, et cetera, et cetera. My generation saw that, and tend to have more personal projects that they're dedicated to. So basically, I looked this up, but Gen Z is becoming one of the most entrepreneurial generations. So this is according to CNBC.com. Almost 2/3 of Gen Z Americans have started or intend to start their own business. Nearly half of Gen Z, about 48%, have numerous side hustles compared to 34% of small business owners. New business formation boomed since the pandemic, but it was much a story of necessity as opportunity. Personal experience. I don't have my own business, but I am an independent contractor, meaning yes, I work at the studio, but I also try to pick up news story articles as well. I do a lot of freelance work and all that stuff. And I think I would rather bet on myself than I would in a company climbing a corporate ladder when I could just get fired.
That's a great point. And I don't think you're going to find statistics on who's fueling quiet quitting yet. I think it's too new. But observationally, I agree with you, actually.
Wow, you sound surprised. We agree on a lot of things. Why do you sound surprised?
Well, no, I mean, did I sound that surprised? Sorry. No, we do agree on a lot of things. It's just that when I got out of college, one of my first jobs was I tried to start my own business. It went well for about a year. I mean, I started, naked zero scratch. And worked my way up where I was paying for myself within about a year. Now, it was a very specific industry-related job, or attempted a company. I was self-employed, so it was my job to do all this stuff. And then a recession hit. This was in Austin, and a recession hit, and it greatly impacted exactly what I was doing. So I had to go out and get a corporate job after that. And I tried a couple and got one and had a job for a while. And then I moved on. Things happen in life. You go on. But I see that, though. I don't necessarily see, I guess, millennials. I always get confused. I know what a boomer is because I'm a boomer.
Okay, so me, Gen Z, my brother, millennial, sister. Well, no, but the oldest one, she's a Gen Xer.
I bet say because anyway, all that stuff. There's some range that they all cross over at some point anyway. But I do agree. I see millennials at my work, whatever kind of range that is, and they're a little easier disenchanted than other people. And I'm not saying this in a negative way. I think a lot of things have affected them. I think when I was growing up, we always talked about the next generation will have more. Every generation will grow, and then it'll continue that growth, and you'll be better off than your parents, and then your children will be better off than you. And I think when the millennials hit, that kind of is when this country plateaued, and some of those kids, some of the millennials, they felt it more so than the constant growth. But really, we only had it for two generations, and that's post the Depression. Coming out of World War II, the 50s and the 60s is where you really saw kids growing on what their parents had given them and being able to achieve greater heights, I guess, be able to be more successful. And then it plateaued off, which at some point created, like I mentioned, some disenchantment. And that affects how people feel about things, whether or not they didn't get their dream jobs. A lot of people don't get their dream jobs. That's something I don't see how that affects them as much. But at least I never got my dream job, but I always worked hard. I always made sure that whatever I was doing, I always tried to excel at it, or at least have above average on my reviews.
You didn't get your dream job, but you do have the indicators of what leads to happiness, which is number 1, family, number 2, religion, number 3, a successful marriage, number 4, a wonderful daughter, plus the other 3 siblings.
Daughters.
So I think there's like a give and take. Like some people are okay. I know someone who's a hairdresser who's okay with being a hairdresser and not being what she wanted to be when she was a kid, simply because she lives on a farm, has a husband, and is independent. You know what I mean? So I think it's like when you have things that you can fall back on that ultimately statistically show are better leader indicators of happiness, then that can give you that fuel to live your life the way you want to live. Millennials aren't getting married because of debt. They're not having kids because of debt. And they also graduated in a time where there was a recession. So I think that's all kind of.
And that, I think that's a good point too, because you mentioned everything about my life. Well, not everything, but along with that was a lot of things that we did. And I was very involved with what my children did. My wife and I have always been very involved in something. So outside of work, and I think that's a big, if you don't have a passion for your job, we talked about it a minute ago, a passion, if you're not going to be, it doesn't bother you to answer email or take a call or work on a project at 9 o'clock at night because you just love doing that, then you need something else in your life that you love. And I had that opportunity with my family, with my children. I was heavily involved in their schools. We talked about the school thing once, but once, we moved over, we were always involved in our children's school. And I'm talking about the extracurricular activities, going to the talent shows, doing all that. It was fun. We knew all the parents of whatever grade our child was in. We knew the parents of everybody in that classroom. We were heavily involved in the little things, and the big things, fall fests and all that. We always knew people and, we're very engaged. So I think that's very important too. And, you can talk about a job, but if you don't have other things in your life going on, like Victoria and I are doing this podcast together. Again, being involved with my children. Now I've got a child who's an adult. Now I'm being involved with my child as an adult. So there's always engagement with the things around you that bring you joy. Then that helps. And if you don't have that, I think Victoria is right. It's harder to get up in the morning and do the thing like go to work and do a good job. I don't leave at 5. I leave at 6. All these little things that we do. I'm not probably the greatest worker on the planet Earth in my current job, but I work hard. I grant that, and I do the things. We've had humongous struggles over the last 3 years. I'm not going to get into them, but so it's hard to get motivated. But I still go. The people I work with, they all are at least engaged in their work to enjoy it tremendously. So also that environment helps at work. If everybody's unhappy where you work, it's hard for you to be happy no matter what your feelings are, even if you like your job.
No, that's true, because
surroundings can matter.
When I was working at a particular place, which was technically like the route to my dream job, and with people who were miserable, that made it hard. I mean, no matter how much you love what you're doing, if you're around people who are very discontent, then that's going to affect your own mental health. But again, I think a lot of it is fueled by millennials, and I'm not saying that like in an accusatory way, negative way, because it's like I totally get why they're disenchanted with this idea of the American dream when home ownership is an unlikely scenario for them. Yeah. They have student loan debt, even though Biden canceled $10,000 of student loan debt, and they also have student loan debt, lack of home ownership, Social Security for them. Like the retirement dream is not going to happen for them. Army, yeah.
They hear all the negative aspects of those things.
Right. So I totally understand where they're coming from, and although, I said I was going to look up the statistics for like who's fueling the quiet quitting.
I don't think you can find. I think it's too new. I said that, and I think you can look.
Yeah.
But, and I don't think that the whole world is falling apart because millennials are having a hard time. They are. And people talk about, biting, whatever is the $10,000 and stuff like that. I think Vicky's point's real good, but you have to kind of push it out a little bit more. They've had the student debt for 10, 15 years. And a lot of them, it was, you see the stories, it's empirical, but, it continues to grow or it doesn't get paid down. You make your monthly payment year over year over year over year, and you still have the original debt. That's disheartening to address that, And I think that was the real problem when we pushed out that, allowing people to borrow money for school isn't really a bad thing, but it should have been, the payback should have been at a nominal rate. I mean, going forward, the cost of student loans should only be enough to pay for administering it. You know, trying to keep it at market rates, it's not going to benefit people going to college. It becomes a negative experience. You get a degree, you get a job. 10 years into that job, you're still looking at thousands or tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt. That's not sustainable. I don't think the $10,000, it's nice, it's a Merry Christmas present, but I don't know if that's the answer, and they need to revamp the whole system. And two things. One, tuition rates have got to be addressed. They're just crazy out of whack. I worked my way through college. Why? Because tuition was affordable. I didn't have to borrow anything. I worked. I had a job the whole time. But I was working service industry and being able to afford college. That's reasonable expectations. What kids are having to pay now, or parents are having to pay now, those are unreasonable expectations, which makes it harder to get into the job market, because then you have to look for a job that pays enough to pay off the debt and still pay rent, pay your car because you got to get to work, things of this nature. And then if you're going to work from home, this is something I wanted to bring up. The corporations have got to pay part of your electric. They got to give you the computer. They got to pay for your Wi-Fi or give you some kind of stipend for your Wi-Fi. It's not fair that your personal expenses are being used for them to make money.
Amen. So I'm going to, we're at 36 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and make one last point, which basically is just a summary of all the points that I made. Now, this is according to Deloitte's 2022 Global Gen Z and Millennial Survey. The survey found that among the top concerns of the Gen Z and Millennial generation is finances, with pay being the number one reason workers in the demographic left their roles in the last 2 years. Yes, I can relate to that. Rent is crazy, and rent is insane, and everything that you need to do to be a competitor in the area that I'm in requires money, and sometimes jobs don't feel that. So finances is something I can relate to. And then it gives an example. Shinny Ko, a millennial software developer, acknowledges that she and many of her colleagues are in the industry for pay, but she too prioritizes stepping away from work when necessary. She's not convinced quite quitting is the best term for setting boundaries. This is from her. It's negative and dangerous that we frame a healthy work-life balance as quitting, says Ko. Can we just call it what it is? It's just working. Now listen to this. When Ko isn't working her 9 to 5, she runs Baobab Farm, a small-scale vegetable farm. She acknowledges that she's got a different mentality when farming, quote, because the farm is my passion and there is an intrinsic motivation to do more. Again, to my point earlier about millennials and Gen Zers, she's a millennial, finding something outside of work to be motivated towards and to have this like entrepreneurial spirit towards is something that is going to take energy away from your regular 9 to 5 job. And I think jobs need to understand that and give flexibility in order for productivity to increase.
There you go, employers in North Texas. You want to hire somebody?
Amen. All right. Any last points, sir?
No. And again, this was about jobs. And I think we kind of went round left and right and never really to the point. But I think we did address some of the issues of why it's hard for employers to hire people. People want more than a paycheck in life. And whether they get it at work or they get it outside of work, and it makes them have a better attitude in life so they do better at work. These are important things. And yes, we need benefits, we need pay, but we also need recognition that we're human beings and we have a life. And so you got to look at that. You got to look at that to bring in quality people. People are thinking about it.
All right. And on that note, we are going to wrap up this episode of This Newsletter is Political. This podcast is political. Sorry, I have a newsletter called This Newsletter is Political. And if you're listening to this is how you get it. So I was not wrong. But thank you for subscribing, share, and be sure to enjoy the rest of this summer. And I am looking forward to all the fall festivities.
State Fair of
State Fair
Texas.
of Texas. That's right. Okay. All right. Sayonara.